Hello everybody, this is Nick, this is Edropian, and in our today's video I will be benchmarking thoroughly the Asus TUF 3090 Gaming in 5 different configurations or else modes on Rainbow Six Siege, Vulkan and DirectX 11. Let's do this! Για ελληνικούς υπότιτλους, αυτό που θα πρέπει να κάνετε θα είναι να έρθετε πάνω στο player σας, να κάνετε κλικ στο εικονίδιο που γράφει CC και με το που το κάνετε αυτό θα δείτε ότι θα σας βγάλει αρχικά αγγλικούς υπότιτλους. Για να πάρουμε τώρα ελληνικούς υπότιτλους θα πρέπει να κάνουμε κλικ στο γρανάζι, να έρθουμε εδώ που λέει Subtitles CC και κάνοντας κλικ εδώ πάνω να πατήσουμε μετά στο Auto Translate και να επιλέξουμε τη γλώσσα που επιθυμούμε μέσα από όλες αυτές, αλλά στη δικιά μας περίπτωση τα ελληνικά. Με το που κάνουμε κλικ έχουμε πλέον ελληνικούς υπότιτλους και είστε σε θέση να δείτε αυτό το βίντεο, ναι μεν τραβηγμένο στα αγγλικά αλλά με ελληνικούς υπότιτλους. Πάμε να συνεχίσουμε τώρα. Awesome! As I said already, today we will be benchmarking the Asus TUF Gaming, the 3090, the non-OC model in 5 different configurations or else modes in an attempt of mine to establish an understanding of what each option brings on the table, how they perform on different graphics APIs, and conclude with the mode I will be using in our future benchmark uploads. For those of you who will land on this video without having seen my previous uploads, let me tell you that there is a reference video I have uploaded here on my channel on YouTube, where you are always welcome to click the subscribe button to help you keep in touch and help me grow this channel, where you will be also able to watch all the necessary details regarding my PC hardware and PC setup, as also other information which are meant to help you with your understanding through this video in order for you to get the most out of it. This video is going to be slightly longer than the one in which we did the same with the 1080 Ti, and that mainly due to the fact that in this one I will be testing all modes in both Vulkan and DirectX 11, and then I will be also comparing them with each other in order for us to get the full picture here and come up with richer conclusions. The 5 modes in which we will be testing the Asus TUF 3090 Gaming are as follows. The first one will be with the card as in stock as shipped configuration. The second one will be with the card set to its maximum power and temperature limit. The third one will be with the card on the Asus Silent Mode. The fourth one will be with the Asus Gaming Mode. The fifth one will be with the card on the Asus OC Mode, and finally the sixth one will be with an OC scan profile applied on the card. Again, for more details you are kindly requested to do yourselves a favor and watch the reference video in which I have explained everything in regard of what I say here to avoid flooding all following videos with that information. All modes are being tested with the BIOS switch on the card turned on the performance mode, where it will also stay for the rest of the life of this card. Finally, in contradiction of to what we did with the 1080 Ti, where I was testing everything on both 1080p and 1440p on no low and max graphic settings, in this video I will be testing everything only on 1440p with maxed out graphics, because I will be comparing mainly the card's performance, and with that in mind I want to decide with what profile I will be moving forward for my targeted or else desired resolution. There will be a following and even more thorough video, if not there already by the time you watch this video always, in which I will be testing the card the same way I did with the 1080 Ti, and on top of that I will be uploading also a video in which we will be comparing the two cards with each other. So make sure to stay tuned because I'm just getting started here. Let's get started, shall we? Awesome! We will start by testing all the 3090 profiles in DirectX 11, and I chose our comparison to begin with the Asus Silent Mode against the 3090 in stock as shipped. Now, the main reason for that is that I am expecting a silent profile to be lower in performance than having the card in stock as shipped, and that because most of the times any kind of silent profile out there comes with underclocking of the core or undervolting it, and it goes like that. On first sight, what I just said appears to be true, because if we pay attention at the sensors table, we see the GPU's core peaking at 1650 MHz, while it remains on average around 1573 MHz, and on the other side, while the card is in stock, as shipped, it maxes out at 1710 MHz and remains around 1661 MHz, which is something 100 MHz higher on average. That is not a surprise at all, and in addition to that, we find our median values to be only 3 FPS apart from each other, concluding to us that, especially when we take into consideration the lesser power consumption from the card while in Asus Silent Mode, even when in Silent Mode we get an amazing performance out of the 3090, and we compromise virtually nothing if we choose to run the card on the Asus Silent Mode for daily usage and tasks. But we are not actually here after the most efficient profile, and while in a way we are, our focus is to end up with the best performing profile for our 3090, right? That being said, performance-wise, as it was expected again, the 3090 in stock as shipped configuration results into more FPS, even though these FPS are marginally higher than when we are under the Asus Silent Mode. Graphs and overall performance aside now, it is really hard to find differences between the two states of the card. The only thing I might be able to say here is that when in the Asus Silent Mode, we get a marginally smoother activity, but that is not enough to make us choose silent over stock in our research for the best performing mode or otherwise state of the card. Moving forward now to our input lag and until display times graphs, we find what I just said about a smoother image while under the Asus Silent Mode to be reversed, and to be honest, it is far more important to focus on the benefits we get when the card is in stock as shipped configuration here, and less important to let a couple spiky moments on the threads activity mislead us from that. This is why we never judge performance until we get the full picture. Long story short, in addition to the 3 FPS more on average that we get out of the stock as shipped mode, we also get a snappier system and more in sync behavior, even if that it is again marginally. The stock as shipped configuration is what I will be choosing to move forward into our next comparison, because it is performing better, but I can't hide that I'm impressed to see the card under the Asus Silent Mode performing that well and having a more balanced system behavior overall. Asus Silent Mode is where you will find me staying the most, unless I am actively doing something performance intense, where the slightest performance uplift helps. When I first put the comparison graphs of the card being in stock and the card being with maxed out power limit and temperature limit in front of me, I must say they got me slightly confused. The 107% power limit leads the card into consuming up to 391 watts of power, which is considerably higher when we compare it with the power consumption we get when the card is in stock as shipped configuration. It was obvious, even from our first group of graphs, that our limiting factor here is mainly the power consumption cap of the card. But by watching at the FPS tables, I can see the same scenario again, where we get marginally higher FPS with the card on 107 power limit. The not even 3 FPS we get more out of the card with the power limit maxed out makes me wonder up to what extent the 3090 is already providing all it has the way it is shipped. It is obvious that we start consuming already a sick amount of watts to get in return a mild and even hard to measure boost out of the card. Watching closely now on our graphs, I can notice that when the card is with maxed out power limit, it is for some reason engaging the CPU more, and considering what happens when the benchmark is around 15 to 20 seconds running, I can't really figure out why at this point, but only to take it as a fact moving forward. Without having anything else noteworthy in regards of the overall performance between the stock as shipped and the 107% power limit state of the 3090, let's move forward with the input lag and the until display times graphs to see if we have anything there. On first sight again, what we see is nearly identical to what we saw when we were comparing the silent mode versus the stock mode, but actually in reverse. Out of the blue, with the power limit and the temperature limit maximized, we end up getting a slightly snappier system behavior, as we also get a behavior which is more in sync. The thing now is that by having an overall better performance with our power and temperature limit maximized, I can't ignore, as I did before, the fact that on the maximized power limit side we get more consistency in terms of sync, and this is a behavior that we want. Again, as we find ourselves chasing the best performing mode in this video, I will choose the maximized power limit mode for us in order to move forward with our next comparison. Moving forward now, our next contender here is the Asus Gaming Mode, which is by all means not what I was expecting it to be in terms of performance. After all the modes we have been through so far, by watching the Asus Gaming Mode, I can't help myself but wonder up to what extent Asus decided to baptize the stock as shipped configuration of the card as their actual gaming mode. I mean, don't get me wrong here, but it is more of a placebo situation than it is the substance of the matter. In Asus Gaming Mode, 3090 is actually consuming the same amount of watts it did in our stock as SIP tests, in addition to having the same core clock and the same overall performance, as you can easily see for yourselves when you look at the FPS table. The overall benefit of choosing to go on with the Asus Gaming Mode is to get the hilarious 2 to 5 MHz more on the GPU core. And as we move forward to our input lag and until display times graphs, by continuing what I was saying already, your benefit will be to get a by 0.1 ms snappier system and by 0.1 more in sync system overall. That being said, it is not that your 3090 won't perform as the beast it is, but in my case, instead of running the Asus GPU Tweak 2 to set my 3090 on the Asus Gaming Mode, I bet that I will get more out of the card by leaving it as is and by closing the Asus GPU Tweak 2 altogether and getting rid of its bloatware activity from my system's background. Taking into consideration all I said so far and the fact that we are actually making again the same comparison, I will choose the maximized power limit configuration for us to move forward with our next comparison in line. You can always pause the video and come up with your own conclusions by studying yourselves the graphs, which are provided here, and personally, I'm done, and I will see you in a couple of seconds. Asus OC now is the first step towards the place I'm trying to land through these comparisons, where we get both the performance and the most efficiency possible out of our 3090. While I got nearly disappointed from what we saw during the previous section of this video and the Asus Gaming Mode, the Asus OC Mode got me back on track. Now, if you wonder why, especially after watching the minimal gains on the FPS table against the maximized power limit mode, let me tell you that you are not paying attention. By setting our 3090 on the Asus OC Mode, we end up consuming less power than we did with the card set to work within its maximum power and temperature limit on its own. And on top of that, we also get to clock considerably higher than we did before by having our core reaching up to 1830 MHz, even though our average stays close to where the maximized power limit mode does, at around 70-18 MHz. Here we get less power consumption, less FPS deviation, higher FPS even though marginally, and that is more than enough to call it a win and a better state for our card. But as always, we can't be certain until we take into consideration and the following group of graphs, which are of course our input lag and our until display times graphs. So let's see what we get there, shall we? Before I say anything, I must say that I was personally expecting to see more gains here. Unfortunately, the gains here are minimal to non-existent, and even though there are gains even by a small margin, I can't call it an improvement in terms of system behavior in that regard. Still, we have a winner here, and moving forward, the Asus OC Mode is the one which provides the best performance up to this point, while it provides also meaningful benefits in the power consumption area that can never be ignored, especially when we find ourselves consuming close to 400 watts here. So, I think we said enough, and it is time for us to move forward and get to our last comparison to see what will be the most we can get out of our card while we conduct our tests with our median between the game and our card to be the DirectX 11. In our final comparison now, we end up comparing apples to apples, and it is time for us to see what an OC scan can bring on the table over the Asus OC Mode. Before I say anything else, you will have to keep in mind that we are using a 3090 with two 8-pins as our power input, which translates into having each 8-pin drawing 155 watts each, leaving the rest of the power to be delivered through the PCI. That is a wall we can't push ourselves through too far with the current BIOS of the card. While most people believe that through an 8-pin you can only draw 150 watts, and having Nvidia putting the cap there for as long as I can remember, it would be worth stating that this is not actually correct. Based on numerous tests I have witnessed through time and actual studies conclusions, an 8-pin can draw safely up to 170 watts easily. The last one who verified that for me was Kingpin, and his partner had published an in-depth explanation on that with actual measurements, etc. I will try to relocate that study and leave a link on the description of this video so you can visit it and read it for your own. Now, if you wonder why I said that here to that extent, what you need to understand is that when we are limited or otherwise capped and we can't actually draw more power, overclocking our card is mainly a desperate attempt of ours through which we try to get the most out of our card within these power limit borders. Based on the silicon each of us is gonna get with his card, will be able to get more or less. This is where by using the OC scan I'm actually trying to mitigate that gap and come up with something which will be achievable by most of us. That being said, and before I move forward, I want you to understand that even though I know what I'm talking about, whatever I said previously cannot be taken as a fact. And before you make any attempts to YOLO and flash your card in order to try to push these limits, you better know really well what you are doing, because it is really easy to destroy your card if not to set your PC on fire. You have been warned, and I'm not accountable of any actions you might make in your systems. Make sure to search it for yourselves and come up with your own conclusions. All I did previously is to open your eyes and broaden your thinking on certain stuff, like the actual power an 8-pin can really deliver. To our comparison now and to our graphs, OC Scan was able to deliver even more performance, and it managed to do that because of the higher average core clock in combination with the higher frequency on our RAMs. That being said, it is not a surprise to see a raised average on our core clock during the benchmark, while we remained on the same power consumption, having zero temperature uplift from what we had with the Asus OC Mode. With our lows raised to a considerable degree and taking into account the reduction on the actual FPS deviation we get without raising our consumption, I think I saw enough here, and I believe we're ready to move forward to see what we get out of our input lag and until display times graphs, so let's do this. Again, while in terms of input lag we don't benefit that much, we can still see some gains in our system's performance, and that is more than welcome because we sacrificed no more power to get there, and all conclude to the fact that if you are to activate the Asus OC Mode on your card, you better make the extra step and OC scan your card to ensure a more efficient OC on your card and get more out of what you will be consuming either way. Finally, our until display time saw some minor improvements too, and with that I think that we can agree on the fact that the 3090 OC scan is the way for me to move forward with my future benchmarks and uploads on this channel, to which you are still more than welcome to subscribe always. Okay, we have concluded what configuration I will be using on my 3090 and why, but we only did that on DirectX 11, right? And I wonder if the same conclusion will come out of us making the same comparison but on the Vulkan version of Rainbow Six Siege this time. What do you say? Shall we get the party started? Alright, let's do this. But before we do, let's get a concluding overview of what we saw so far through a bar chart. Starting with our Vulkan tests now, I will do what we did with DirectX 11, but I'll try to pick up the pace a bit because we have been through the meats and potatoes of the profiles comparison so far. So I will be trying to pinpoint and stick with what matters the most here. That being said, starting with our comparisons between the Asus Silent Mode and the stock as shipped configuration of the 3090, we see the performance comparison between them to repeat, but with a more emphatical performance gap here. This is more than expected, as by using Vulkan we brought more into the equation our CPU, and that is easy to notice by taking a closer look on our frame times and FPS graphs. What is worth noting here is that we find the power consumption of the card to the levels we were in DirectX 11 while under OC, and it remains for us to see again what the actual differences will be moving forward. Again, even though it is expected from Asus Silent Mode to have lesser performance over stock due to substantial lower clock frequencies and a far lower consumption, what I said during DirectX 11 remains the same here. Asus Silent Mode will be by all means my daily usage mode, as it remains a beast in terms of performance by lowering the power consumption at the same time, and that is always welcome when the tasks in hand are not important or performance sensitive. Moving now to our input lag and until display times graphs, it is not a surprise to see the gains of the stock as shipped over the Asus Silent Mode present here again, but with them not being crazy. What I said earlier about having the Asus Silent Mode as my primary mode, to which you will find me for daily usage, makes even more sense now. The stock as shipped configuration is again the mode of our choice, and we find ourselves ready to move forward with the next comparison, so let's waste no time and let's do this. While what we saw in this comparison in our DirectX 11 tests repeats here, the overall situation is completely different. And who could tell that maximizing our power limit up to 107% and temperature limit to its max at 90 degrees Celsius will return only an increment of 5 watts in the max the card was able to draw during the benchmarks. Other than that, the card remains on the same average consumption in both cases, with an average core clock to be identical and the card finding itself clocking lower as its max when we set the power limit on the 107%. All things considered, we see some minor to non-existent gains on our averages and our median value on the 107% power limit side, while we end up watching at the same time the paradox of having better lows on stock than we do when we increase our power limit. Taking a closer look now at my CPU's clocks and power consumption, we can see that this behavior is probably the result of lesser engagement of the CPU in these runs. And with that, I will move forward to our input lag and until display times graphs to get the full picture and decide what to do next. Once again, we get to realize that focusing only on the FPS is a bad thing to do, and while we can say that by maximizing the power limit resulted in a minimal but lower performance FPS aside, in our input lag and until display times graphs and tables, we can spot the tension of getting lower times here with the power limit maximized, which means an actual tension towards a better system performance, and I will choose to stick to that and decide to move forward with a 107% power limit configuration. When we were going through that same test in DirectX 11, we figured that what Asus calls their gaming mode was mostly the stock as shipped configuration of the card. Well, things might be even worse here. The Asus Gaming Mode might be sitting even lower than the stock as shipped does. Yeah, at first what I was watching made me think that my results might be flawed, and that forced me to rerun the full test again for that configuration. Believe it or not, there's no flaw in my tests and the results were the same. Long story short, the Asus Gaming Mode manages to get more consistent and less deviant performance overall, but it sits again lower than the 107% power limit does overall. That is probably the result of having the card drawing far less power than it did with the 107% power limit and clocking considerably lower than it did with the power limit maximized. What is more than confusing and worth noting though is the fact that in our Vulkan tests, gaming mode is even worse than having the card left on stock as shipped. Let's see what story have the input lag and until display times graphs to tell. As expected, while we see minimal gains of having the card with just its power and temperature limit maximized, we can't ignore that the system works worse while we set the card in the Asus Gaming Mode again. Seriously now, what the f*** Asus? As you all guessed it by now, we are moving forward with the 107% power limit as our winner from this comparison. The story in this comparison repeats itself, and while the Asus OC Mode won't manage to draw more power than the maximized power limit did, it brings gains on the table. These gains are the result of a higher average core clock functionality overall, as we see through our sensors tables, and while everything else seems to be identical in both configurations, we can witness lesser FPS deviation in the Asus OC side on top of the consistent better FPS across all percentiles. But as always, this is half the story, so let's move to our input lag and until display times to get the full picture once again. Having better input lag times, even by a margin of error on the Asus OC Mode side, I was tempted to call it and say that we are done here, but that was until I paid attention to our sync table, where we see the majority of the samples on the maximized power limit side sitting lower than they do on our Asus OC Mode side. All things considered, we are witnessing an identical system behavior, and that is mind-blowing if you take into consideration that on the one side we have the card acting wild on its own by only letting it get the maximum power it is allowed to and do all the rest as it pleases it to do, and that on the other hand we have a preset overclock which you expect to bring on the table an overall better behavior. That is not the case here, but even though it is not, having a tie in terms of system performance overall, my only option is to take into account the overall FPS uplifts we get out of the Asus OC Mode to decide to finally move forward with it again. If there's one thing to say before we move into our next comparison here, then that is that you should consider an OC scan on your card instead of using the Asus OC Mode, but a custom OC might be proven to be a better choice overall. At first, while we take a look at our FPS tables, someone, including myself, can't ignore the fact that we get better lows with the Asus OC Mode. But that is not enough considering again where they lie and watching at the same time a better median and average on the OC scan side. On top of the higher clocks we get, in addition to the fact that we get the same power consumption on both sides. I tend to lean towards the OC scan again. With OC scan now, we get more pumpy the higher we get into the percentiles, and while we get a slightly higher deviation with OC scan, I really need to check the input lag and the until display times graphs to help me decide here, because it is a close call. This is once again what I'm trying to help people understand through my benchmark videos. The frame times and the FPS graphs and tables always tell half the story, because on my end, losing a couple of frames on my lows by ending up with a more consistent system behavior is worth it in most of the cases. And this is one of these cases. And if you wonder why this is one of these cases, that is because I saw the tension of the system to provide more FPS in the long run while under the OC scan profile. The thing now is that the Asus OC Mode appears to be more consistent, having a better sync performance here, with the majority of its samples sitting on the same timing, while on the other side the OC scan appears to be spread out with an emphasis on sitting lower on average, but consistency is a better behavior, and that leaves us to consider the input lag performance in order for us to decide. The input lag differences now are making my life really hard. While focusing on the numbers, we can say that OC scan delivers better, but the differences are not enough to call it a game here. Concluding, I decided to focus on the overall tension we see with the OC scan and take also into account the outcome of the DirectX 11 to help me decide here. By all means, the Asus OC Mode is head-to-head here with the results we get out of the OC scan, but still we can never ignore the fact that we did not consume more watts to put the tension to our system to produce better results. What is certain though is that there is room for more optimization here, and that going on with the custom overclock might be the way forward. For now, concluding our Vulkan tests and taking into account also the tests we did with the DirectX 11, I believe that marching forward with my future uploads, sticking to the OC scan configuration is the right choice, and this is what I'm going to do. Now, let's conclude our Vulkan testing with our final conclusive bar chart here, and right after that, let's move forward into a head-to-head comparison of the DirectX 11 performance against the Vulkan performance in all the 3090 modes we saw so far. Are you with me? Alright, this is our final part of this video, and in this part I will be just showing to you all the modes of the 3090 against each other, the DirectX 11 against the Vulkan. I'm not going to comment anything because I will be coming up with comparison videos in the future where we will have more things to say. So I'll leave it to you to draw your own conclusions, and these are our graphs. So that was it, folks, and I hope you got some value out of this video, and if you did, consider leaving a comment behind saying what you liked the most out of this video, and of course sharing and thumb up on this video are much appreciated because engagement with my videos help them in the eyes of the Google algorithm to be considered as valuable, and that helps the video and this channel to grow. So with that being said, I will be coming up with a ton of more videos comparing 1080 Ti against 3090, 3090 itself. I will be also making videos where we will consider the impact, where we will be researching the impact of live streaming with Nvenc New against NDI, while we play on a DirectX 11 title, on a Vulkan based title, etc. And yeah, that being said, see you on the next one.